with your experiences at Cal, and you talked about kind of being the big fit or the small fish in the big pond, and going to a school where very deep roster, there's probably freshmen coming in every single year who are just, again, some of the best rowers probably on earth, in many ways, like, at least at the college level. Tell me a little bit about like that experience. 'Cause I also want to talk a little bit about, kind of your transition into being a volunteer over there, and being a part of the actual coaching staff. But tell me a little bit about like the experience and what you learned being a part of a roster of that caliber, and the training and this, some of the things that you learned about yourself going through those 4 years.
Yeah. So, showing up, I always remember, like, I went to practice, and lo and behold, there's an Olympian, a guy who competed in Rio, at the boathouse, and I'm just, some schmuck who, rocked up from a small high school. So, that was very eye opening, and it definitely took an adjustment period. And I think sort of the main takeaway, or one of the main takeaways, Kevin, is like, if you go to a program like that, and really, this is really true for any program, but I can just sort of speak to my own experiences. You can't afford to sort of hide and just go through the motions and expect to be in an advantageous position. You have to sort of be your best advocate through your own actions, and that means putting in the extra work, outside of practice hours, so that when you show up to practice, like, you're ready to go. You can't afford to fall behind, and because there are going to be a lot of guys who are going to be ready to pass you. My freshman class was 22 guys, and so you show up, and at the end of the day, like, you're racing a freshman 8 in the spring. You got to be the top 8 oarsmen in a group of 22 already very accomplished athletes. So really, the only way to do that is to put your best foot forward, not only at practice but outside of practice, and just to show up every day ready to compete. And that was one of the major takeaways that I got from being in the mix as an athlete myself, and then also as a coach, is like, the best guys are the ones who handle the details in all aspects of their life. Rowing, absolutely, but at the end of the day, like, you're a student athlete, so you got to go to class, you got to crush the schoolwork, you got to stay on top of the hours of homework, and stay on top of the sleep, stay on top of the refueling, because it's when you lose track of one or two of those items that they really start to snowball. And it's when you lose track of the details that you start to maybe see yourself plateau, or you see yourself slip down the urge sheet, or what have you. And so that was sort of one of my major takeaways, and something that, quite frankly, hit me like a ton of bricks when I arrived at school was, you can't just go through the motions. You can't just do what you're told. You got to do a little bit more, and you got to stay on top of the stuff that the coaches don't see. So, that was sort of the main takeaway. And also just, having a mindset based around patience, as I'm sure and anyone who's been around rowing long enough knows, you're not going to see major improvements. There's not like one little technical thing that's going to bump you from the 4V to the varsity in a day or a week or a month or even a year. It takes just consistent effort, in battling through those plateaus, and pushing through tough periods of training, and that's ultimately where you see the massive gains coming over the course of 6 months or a semester or a year or even a career. And I think the people who are able to manage the highs and lows the best are the ones who are going to see the long-term success come through for them the most.